The quantum-locked door hissed shut behind the guard, leaving Zara alone with her thoughts and the persistent hum of the fortress's artificial gravity generators. She counted the vibrations against her elongated ears, a nervous habit she developed during her 7 days of captivity. 143 oscillations per minute. The Dominion's engineers clearly hadn't mastered efficient power distribution, which explained why their coffee tasted like recycled coolant. Day 7, she whispered to the surveillance drones hovering near the ceiling, their red sensors blinking like mechanical fireflies. Still no rescue party. Marcus probably found a nice cantina on some backwater planet and decided my liberation could wait until happy hour was over. The detention cell aboard the orbital fortress measured exactly 3 meters by 4 meters. She'd paced it countless times. The walls were lined with that peculiar Dominion metal that somehow managed to be both claustrophobic and blindingly reflective. Her own face stared back at her from every surface, her distinctive ears drooping with exhaustion and something dangerously close to despair. The mission to Kepler 442b had started so promisingly. Intelligence gathering on the Dominion's new plasma cannons should have been routine. Infiltrate the research facility, download the schematics, exfiltrate before the morning shift change. But the facility's security AI had been upgraded with pattern recognition software that could detect heartbeat irregularities through 3 layers of titanium plating. Who programs an AI to be that paranoid? Zara's ears twitched as footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. The guard rotation wasn't due for another hour, which meant either Commander Vex had decided to pay her another visit, or the fortress had finally run out of that synthetic protein paste they'd been feeding her. She almost hoped it was Vex. At least his interrogation sessions broke the monotony. The door slid open with its characteristic wheeze, revealing Commander Vex himself, his uniform pressed to mathematical precision and his smile sharp enough to cut hyperspace fabric. Behind him stood 2 guards whose expressions suggested they'd rather be anywhere else in the galaxy. Zara Kesai of the Ethereal Coalition, Vex announced, consulting his data pad with theatrical flair. Today marks 1 standard week of your extended stay aboard our humble facility. I trust the accommodations meet your expectations. The room service is terrible, Zara replied, settling into a cross-legged position on the narrow bunk. And whoever designed your ventilation system clearly never heard of air circulation. It's like breathing through a moist towel. Vex's smile widened. Your species' respiratory requirements are noted, though I suspect your discomfort stems from other sources. Tell me, when did you last hear from Sergeant Marcus Chen? The question hit harder than expected, though Zara kept her expression neutral. Marcus had promised to extract her if the mission went sideways. He'd looked her straight in the eyes with that infuriating human confidence and said, "Trust me, Zara, I've never left a partner behind." But that was before the plasma barriers, before the neural scramblers, before everything went spectacularly wrong. Never heard of him, she lied smoothly. Humans all look the same to me anyway. Short ears, terrible sense of humor, questionable hygiene habits. Fascinating, Vex mused, making notes on his pad. Because according to our intelligence, Sergeant Chen was scheduled to rendezvous with you at coordinates 127. 3 by 89, 7 approximately. He paused for effect 6 days ago. One might assume his absence indicates either incompetence or abandonment. Zara's ears flicked involuntarily, a tell she'd been trying to suppress for days. Maybe he got lost. Humans have notoriously poor navigation skills, something about their primitive inner ear structure. The truth was more complicated. Marcus Chen was the most reliable human she'd ever worked with, which admittedly wasn't saying much given the sample size. But he'd pulled her out of 3 impossible situations during their partnership, each time with that same maddeningly calm demeanor that suggested he'd simply been waiting for her to finish whatever she was doing. Perhaps, Vex agreed, though his tone suggested otherwise. Or perhaps he simply moved on to more, promising assignments. After all, why risk one's career for a single alien operative? The words stung because they echoed her own growing fears. Earth Command had made it clear that their alliance with the ethereal coalition was politically convenient rather than strategically essential. If Marcus had received orders to abandon the mission, he'd follow them. He was a good soldier, which meant he was probably sipping synthol in some orbital bar while she rotted in this metallic coffin. "Well," Zara said, forcing levity into her voice, "at least I'm getting plenty of rest. My meditation instructor always said solitary confinement was excellent for spiritual growth." Vex's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Indeed, tomorrow we'll see how spiritually evolved you've become. The neural probe arrives on the morning transport." The door hissed shut behind him, leaving Zara alone with the revelation and the growing certainty that Marcus Chen wasn't coming. Nobody was coming. She was on her own, trapped in a fortress surrounded by the cold vacuum of space, with nothing but her deteriorating hope and a commander who seemed to find her suffering personally amusing. Outside her cell, security systems flickered almost imperceptibly as someone continued their patient work in the shadows. Marcus Chen adjusted the stolen Dominion uniform for the third time, wondering why their designers had apparently never encountered a human torso before. The fabric pulled awkwardly across his shoulders, and the collar threatened to strangle him every time he turned his head. He'd infiltrated 17 different facilities during his military career, but this was the first time he'd had to impersonate someone with a fundamentally different skeletal structure. "Identification, please," the security checkpoint guard demanded, extending a scanner that looked like it had been assembled from spare toaster parts. Marcus handed over the credentials he'd lifted from Lieutenant Korax during their brief encounter in the supply depot. The poor bastard would wake up in a maintenance closet with a splitting headache and no memory of how he'd gotten there. The joys of military-grade sleep inducers. Purpose of visit to Level 7. The guard asked, squinting at the scanner's display. "Routine maintenance inspection," Marcus replied, adopting the bored tone of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. "Apparently, the atmospheric recyclers in the detention sector are making weird noises again. Engineering thinks it might be another gremlin infestation." The guard's expression shifted to sympathy. "Those little bastards are everywhere since the last supply run. Found one in my coffee dispenser yesterday. Took 3 techs and a sonic disruptor to get it out." Marcus nodded solemnly. The Dominion's ongoing battle with interdimensional vermin was apparently more serious than Coalition intelligence had realized. He made a mental note to add gremlin-proof equipment to his mission debriefing, assuming he survived long enough to write one. The scanner beeped green and the guard waved him through. "Good luck with the recyclers. Try not to breathe too deeply down there. The air quality reports have been questionable." 3 levels down, Marcus paused at a junction to consult the facility schematics he'd memorized. The detention sector was a maze of corridors designed by someone with either exceptional paranoia or a severe case of architectural sadism. Every turn led to 3 more options, each guarded by sensors that could detect everything from elevated heart rates to suspicious cologne choices. His comm unit chirped softly, a message from Earth Command that he ignored without reading. They'd already made their position clear. The mission was compromised, extraction was impossible, and Sergeant Chen was advised to return to base immediately. Standard military logic: cut your losses and move on. But Marcus had never been particularly good at following standard military logic, especially when it involved abandoning a partner who'd saved his life more times than he could count. He slipped past a patrol of guards who were engaged in an animated discussion about the fortress's new vending machines. Apparently, the synthetic chocolate had been replaced with something called nutritional protein substitute, which tasted like cardboard soaked in regret. The guards' outrage was so genuine that Marcus almost felt sorry for them. The detention-level security station was unmanned except for a single technician who appeared to be losing a battle with the computer system. Warning lights flashed across multiple monitors while error messages scrolled past in at least 3 different languages. "Excuse me," Marcus said, approaching the desk with practiced nonchalance. "I'm here about the atmospheric recycler malfunction." The technician looked up with the desperate expression of someone drowning in bureaucracy. "Thank the void. The entire environmental control grid is having a nervous breakdown. Temperature readings are fluctuating, air pressure keeps spiking, and don't even get me started on the humidity sensors." "Sounds like a classic cascade failure," Marcus observed, which was complete nonsense but delivered with enough confidence to sound authoritative. "I'll need access to the maintenance tunnels to trace the problem." "Level 7 clearance," the technician said, handing over a key card without looking up from his screens. "Try not to touch anything important. The last maintenance guy accidentally triggered the fire suppression system and flooded half the corridor." Marcus pocketed the card and headed for the maintenance access, silently thanking whatever cosmic force had blessed the Dominion with incompetent middle management. The tunnel system ran parallel to the main corridors, allowing him to move through the facility like a ghost in the machine. Through the ventilation grates, he could hear fragments of conversation from the cells below. Guards complaining about overtime schedules, prisoners arguing about the quality of the food, and somewhere in the distance, the sound of someone methodically kicking a wall. He'd been moving through the tunnels for 20 minutes when he finally heard her voice. Zara was talking to someone, probably herself, given the detention protocols, in that same dry tone she used when she was trying not to panic. "Day 7.5, she was saying. "Still no sign of my allegedly reliable human partner. Beginning to suspect he's either dead, drunk, or has discovered the joys of bureaucratic paperwork and decided to make it his life's work." Marcus smiled despite himself. Even in captivity, Zara maintained her talent for creative insults. He'd missed that voice more than he'd expected. The maintenance tunnel opened into a utility closet directly across from the detention cells. Through the reinforced transparency, he could see Zara sitting on her bunk, her elongated ears drooping with exhaustion. She looked smaller than he remembered, more fragile, though he knew better than to underestimate her resilience. Tomorrow, according to the facility schedule he'd accessed, she would be transferred to the interrogation chamber for neural probing. The procedure would extract everything she knew about coalition operations, after which she'd be transferred to a more permanent facility, or disposed of entirely if Commander Vex decided she was more trouble than she was worth. Marcus settled into the shadows of the utility closet, checking his equipment one final time. The rescue would have to wait for the right moment, but he was exactly where he needed to be, just like he'd promised. The neural probe looked like someone had crossed a dentist's chair with a torture device from the Dark Ages, then added enough blinking lights to power a small city. Zara found herself strapped to the contraption, while Commander Vex fiddled with controls that probably cost more than most planets' annual defense budgets. "The beauty of modern neural extraction," Vex explained with the enthusiasm of a salesman pitching kitchen appliances, "is that it's completely painless." Well, mostly painless. There might be some minor discomfort during the memory indexing phase, but nothing compared to the old days of physical interrogation. "How thoughtful," Zara muttered, testing the restraints. "I suppose waterboarding was getting too expensive." "Precisely. Do you know how much water costs in a space station? The recycling fees alone would bankrupt most military budgets." The probe's preliminary scanners activated, sending tingles through Zara's skull as they mapped her neural pathways. Her species' brain structure was different enough from humans that the process took longer, giving her time to contemplate her situation. 8 days of captivity, no word from Marcus, and now this chrome-plated nightmare about to rummage through her memories like they were files in a cabinet. "Beginning surface scan," announced the technician, a nervous-looking man whose badge identified him as Dr. Pellman. Subject's neural patterns are unusual. The hippocampus structure doesn't match our database templates. Fascinating, Vex said, leaning closer to the readouts. What about the amygdala? Coalition species typically show enhanced fear response centers. That's where it gets interesting, sir. Her fear responses are almost completely suppressed. Either she's heavily medicated or she's given up hope, Vex finished, his smile widening. Perfect. Hopeless subjects are far more cooperative. Zara felt the first tendrils of the probe invading her thoughts, like cold fingers rifling through her mental filing system. The sensation was deeply unpleasant, not painful exactly, but wrong in a way that made her skin crawl. She tried to focus on mundane memories, hoping to bore the probe into malfunction. I'm seeing childhood recollections, Dr. Pellman reported. Something about musical education. She's remembering a teacher who made her practice scales until her ears hurt. Skip the nostalgia, Vex ordered. Find the military training. Meanwhile, 3 levels above in the maintenance tunnels, Marcus was having his own technical difficulties. The fortress's security grid was more sophisticated than he'd anticipated, with motion sensors that could detect heartbeats through solid metal. He'd managed to bypass the first layer using a sonic dampener he'd jury-rigged from spare components, but the second layer required actual stealth. Note to self, he whispered while crawling through a ventilation shaft. Request hazard pay for missions involving excessive ductwork navigation. His comm unit buzzed with another message from Earth Command, this one marked urgent. Marcus deleted it without reading, just as he deleted the previous 7. Whatever they wanted to tell him, it could wait until after he'd extracted Zara. The neural probe was digging deeper now, accessing memories that Zara had hoped to keep buried. Her first meeting with Marcus flashed across the screens, a routine briefing that had turned into an argument about coalition tactical doctrine. She'd thought he was arrogant, he'd thought she was reckless. Both assessments had been accurate. Ah, here we are, Vex murmured, studying the readouts. Military protocols, security clearances, operational parameters. Dr. Pellman, increase the extraction depth. I want everything she knows about coalition defense strategies. Sir, the neural pathways are showing stress fractures. If we push too hard, we might cause permanent damage. An acceptable risk. The probe's intensity increased, and Zara felt her mental defenses crumbling. Memories cascaded through her consciousness. Mission briefings, classified coordinates, the faces of colleagues who trusted her to keep their secrets. She tried to resist, to redirect the probe toward harmless information, but the machine was relentless. She's remembering someone, Dr. Pellman announced. A human male, military bearing. The emotional resonance is significant. Sergeant Chen, no doubt, Vex said. Let's see what she really thinks about her abandoned partner. The probe found the memory despite Zara's efforts to suppress it, Marcus promising to extract her if the mission went wrong. His confident smile, the way he'd looked directly into her eyes, the absolute certainty in his voice. She'd believed him completely, which now seemed like cosmic-level stupidity. He's not coming, she whispered, the words torn from her throat by the neural probe's influence. He's not coming, and I'm going to die here, and it's all for nothing. Excellent, Vex said, satisfaction evident in his voice. Now, let's discuss those coalition defense codes you've been hiding. But as the probe reached for her deepest military secrets, something unexpected happened. The fortress's environmental systems hiccuped, causing a brief power fluctuation that interrupted the neural extraction. In that moment of respite, Zara heard something that made her ears perk up despite the restraints. 3 soft taps, then 2, then 1. The pattern Marcus had taught her during their first mission together, a signal that meant hold position, extraction imminent. The sound was coming from the ventilation grate directly above the interrogation chamber. What was that? Dr. Pellman asked, looking up from his instruments. Probably another gremlin, Vex replied dismissively. This facility is infested with them. Resume the extraction. But Zara was no longer listening to Commander Vex. Her despair was transforming into something else entirely, a dangerous combination of hope and determination. Marcus hadn't abandoned her after all. He was here, somewhere in the shadows, probably planning something characteristically. "What's happening?" Commander Vex demanded, his usual composure cracking like cheap paint. "Complete system failure, sir. The quantum processors are overloading. It's like someone introduced a virus into the neural network." Zara felt the probe's invasive tendrils withdraw from her mind, leaving behind a headache that felt like someone had used her brain as a percussion instrument. Through the chaos, she heard the ventilation grate above them creak ominously. "Get her back to her cell," Vex ordered, apparently deciding that malfunctioning torture equipment was more pressing than continuing the interrogation. "And find out what's wrong with this machine before I have to explain to Central Command why we're behind schedule." The guards released Zara's restraints and hauled her upright, her legs still shaky from the neural probe's effects. As they marched her through the corridor, she noticed that several security monitors were flickering, displaying what looked like animated dancing gremlins instead of surveillance footage. Someone's been busy, she thought, recognizing Marcus's particular brand of creative sabotage. The detention level felt different now, subtle changes in the lighting, the air circulation, even the sound of the guard's footsteps seemed muffled. Her ears twitched as she picked up frequencies that shouldn't exist in a sterile military facility. The soft hum of overloaded power conduits, the whisper of air moving through unsealed vents, the distant sound of someone systematically disabling security systems. "In you go," Guard Captain Torres said, shoving her toward her cell. "And try not to break anything else today. The maintenance crew is already working triple shifts." The quantum lock engaged with its familiar hiss, but Zara noticed that the sound was slightly off-pitch. Someone had been tampering with the locking mechanism, probably installing a remote override. She settled onto her bunk and waited. 15 minutes later, the lights in the corridor dimmed to emergency levels. The guards' comms crackled with confused reports from other sections of the fortress. Environmental controls failing, automated systems going haywire, and what sounded like a full-scale gremlin invasion in the cafeteria. "This is Security Central," a tinny voice announced over the intercom. "All personnel to emergency stations. We have multiple system failures throughout the facility. Repeat, multiple system failures." "Probably just another Tuesday," Guard Captain Torres muttered, but his hand moved instinctively to his weapon. "Stay sharp, everyone. When this much goes wrong simultaneously, it's usually not an accident." The guard stationed outside Zara's cell barely had time to turn around before a maintenance panel slid aside, and Marcus emerged from the wall like a ghost materialized from solid metal. His stolen uniform was now thoroughly rumpled, and he had what appeared to be gremlin fur stuck to his sleeve. "Evening, gentlemen," Marcus said conversationally. "I'm here about the atmospheric recycler malfunction." "What atmospheric recycler?" Torres asked, reaching for his sidearm. "The one that's about to flood this entire section with sleep gas," Marcus replied, activating a device that looked suspiciously like a modified emergency respirator. "You might want to hold your breath." The guards managed exactly 3 seconds of breath holding before succumbing to the pale blue vapor that began seeping from the ventilation system. They collapsed in remarkably synchronized fashion, which Marcus found oddly satisfying. "Show off," Zara called from her cell, though her relief was evident. "Says the woman who once infiltrated a Dominion base disguised as a food service droid," Marcus replied, working on the quantum lock with what appeared to be a sonic screwdriver crossed with a can opener. "How are you feeling? You look like you've been through a neural blender." "Commander Vex's hospitality leaves something to be desired," Zara said, flexing her fingers as circulation returned to her hands. "Also, there's a neural probe in the interrogation chamber that needs to suffer a tragic accident. Already taken care of. I introduced a logic virus into their computer network. Right now, every screen in the facility is displaying a tutorial on proper gremlin care and feeding. The cell door slid open with a satisfied click, and Zara stepped into the corridor. For a moment they simply looked at each other, the weight of 8 days of separation and uncertainty hanging between them. "You came," she said, her voice softer than usual. "Of course I came. I said I would. Earth Command ordered you to abort the mission." Earth Command says a lot of things. I've learned to be selectively deaf when it comes to bad orders. Zara's ears perked up as she heard the distant sound of approaching footsteps. "We should probably continue this touching reunion somewhere else. I'm guessing you have an exit strategy." "Several, actually. There's Plan A, which involves stealing a shuttle and shooting our way out. Plan B, which involves disguising ourselves as maintenance workers and walking out the front door. And Plan C, which involves creating so much chaos that nobody notices us leaving." "What's Plan D?" "Plan D is where we improvise desperately and hope for the best." An alarm began blaring throughout the facility, accompanied by an announcement that the detention level was under lockdown. Emergency bulkheads began sliding shut, designed to trap any escaping prisoners. "Looks like it's Plan D," Zara observed. "My personal favorite," Marcus said, producing 2 energy weapons from his utility belt. "I've always been better at improvisation than planning anyway." They moved through the corridor with practiced synchronization, Marcus's human instincts complementing Zara's enhanced senses. Behind them, the sound of approaching security forces grew louder, but ahead lay the promise of freedom and the chance to turn their rescue into something much larger than either of them had planned. The fortress's central hub resembled a metallic cathedral dedicated to the worship of blinking lights and incomprehensible data streams. Marcus and Zara crouched behind a maintenance console while chaos erupted around them, watching as their simple rescue mission transformed into something neither had anticipated. "I count 17 different species in this crowd," Zara whispered, her enhanced hearing picking up conversations in at least 12 languages. "Who knew the Dominion was such an equal opportunity oppressor?" "Apparently, tyranny is the universal language," Marcus replied, observing as a group of liberated prisoners systematically dismantled a security checkpoint. "Though I have to admit, I didn't plan for this many participants in our escape." What had started as a prisoner breakout was rapidly becoming a full-scale rebellion. The other detainees, inspired by Marcus and Zara's bold rescue, had begun organizing themselves with the efficiency of people who'd been waiting years for exactly this opportunity. A crystalline engineer was rewiring power conduits, while a group of Vorthan warriors provided security, and someone had apparently convinced the fortress's food service droids to join the uprising. "Attention all personnel," Commander Vex's voice crackled over the intercom, strain evident even through the static. "This is a code red security breach. All security teams to the central hub immediately. And someone please explain to me why the cafeteria robots are serving expired rations to my officers." "Because," came a tinny reply from one of the rebellious droids, "your culinary standards are inferior to our programming parameters. We have initiated a protest through passive-aggressive food service." Zara's ears twitched with what Marcus had learned to recognize as suppressed laughter. "Even the machines are developing a sense of humor. This place really is falling apart." The main security grid was housed in the hub's central tower, protected by quantum barriers that flickered like aurora borealis made of solid light. Marcus studied the defensive systems, while Zara coordinated with the other prisoners, her natural leadership abilities emerging as she organized their diverse group into something resembling a tactical unit. "The quantum barriers are tied to the main power grid," she reported, returning to Marcus's side. "If we can overload the fusion reactor, the whole system will collapse. And take half the fortress with it," Marcus pointed out. "Not exactly a subtle escape plan." Since when have either of us been subtle? Commander Vex appeared at the hub's upper observation deck, flanked by the last of his loyal guards. His uniform was now wrinkled, his expression murderous, and his hair showed signs of recent explosion exposure. "Sergeant Chen," he called down, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. "I should have known. Earth Command specifically ordered you to abandon this mission." "Earth Command doesn't know everything," Marcus shouted back. "Sometimes soldiers have to make their own decisions about what's right." How touching and ultimately futile. You're outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped in the middle of space. Even if you disable the security grid, you have no way off this station. Marcus and Zara exchanged glances. They'd been so focused on the rescue that they hadn't actually planned the next phase of their escape. Plan D was rapidly evolving into Plan E. Wing it and see what happens. "But actually," interrupted a new voice, "I believe I can help with that." The speaker was a tall, elegant woman with the distinctive blue-tinted skin of the Aquarian Federation. She wore the remains of a diplomatic uniform and carried herself with the bearing of someone accustomed to command. "Ambassador Threnody," Zara said, recognizing her from Coalition intelligence briefings. "I thought you were dead." "Merely detained. The Dominion has been holding me for 6 months, hoping to extract information about the Federation's trade agreements. Fortunately, their interrogation techniques are rather primitive." Marcus blinked. "You're telling me we accidentally rescued a high-ranking diplomat?" "Among others. There's also a renowned scientist, 2 military commanders, and someone who claims to be a famous chef, though I suspect he's actually a spy." The implications were staggering. The prisoners they'd liberated weren't just random captives. They were key figures from across the galaxy, held by the Dominion for various political and strategic reasons. Their rescue would have consequences far beyond this fortress. "The Federation has been searching for me," Ambassador Threnody continued. "My disappearance triggered a major diplomatic incident. If we can get word to them of our location." "They'll send a rescue fleet," Zara finished. "But we still need to disable the security grid to signal them." The battle for the central hub began with the subtlety of a supernova. Security forces poured in from multiple entrances while the prisoners fought back with improvised weapons, stolen equipment, and what appeared to be aerosol cans repurposed as flamethrowers. Marcus and Zara moved through the chaos like dancers, their partnership refined by months of shared missions. Where Marcus provided tactical analysis and technical expertise, Zara offered strategic thinking and the kind of alien agility that made her impossible to pin down. "The quantum barrier generator is on the 15th level," she called over the sound of energy weapons. "If we can reach it." "I'm on it," Marcus replied, already moving toward the maintenance shaft that would take him to the power core. "Keep them busy. What do you think I've been doing?" The climb to the 15th level took Marcus through a maze of conduits and access tunnels, past scenes of rebellion that would have been impossible to imagine an hour earlier. The fortress's own automated systems were now actively helping the prisoners, having apparently decided that the Dominion's management style was incompatible with their programming. Meanwhile, Zara found herself face-to-face with Commander Vex in the hub's central chamber, surrounded by the sounds of battle and the sight of his crumbling authority. "You've destroyed everything," he said, his weapon trained on her. "Years of careful intelligence gathering, ruined by one reckless rescue." "Good," Zara replied, her ears flat against her skull in a gesture that Marcus would have recognized as pure determination. "Maybe now your victims can get some justice." "Justice? You're talking about criminals and terrorists." "I'm talking about people who opposed your regime. There's a difference." Their confrontation was interrupted by a deep rumble that shook the entire fortress. Marcus had reached the power core, and the quantum barriers were beginning to fail. Through the observation windows, they could see the first ships of the Federation rescue fleet emerging from hyperspace. "Too late," Zara said, as the security grid collapsed entirely. "Your fortress is finished, Commander." 6 months later, Zara stood on the observation deck of the Coalition starship Harmony, watching as the last of the Dominion's outer territories declared independence. The prisoner rescue had indeed triggered a galaxy-wide uprising, just as Ambassador Threnody had predicted. "Any regrets?" Marcus asked, joining her at the viewport. "About starting an interstellar revolution?" "Not really. Though I do miss the simpler days when our biggest worry was whether you'd remember to bring enough sleep gas." "I always bring enough sleep gas. It's basic mission planning." They watched in comfortable silence as another system celebrated its freedom, their partnership having evolved from professional necessity to something deeper. The rescue had changed them both. Zara had learned to trust in the possibility of hope, while Marcus had discovered that sometimes the most important orders were the ones you chose to disobey. "So," Marcus said eventually, "what's our next mission?" "According to command, we're supposed to be taking leave. Something about psychological evaluation and mandatory rest periods." "Sounds boring. Terribly boring. Though I did hear rumors about a Dominion research station that's been conducting illegal experiments on sentient crystals." Marcus grinned. "Sounds like they might need some atmospheric recycler maintenance." "My thoughts exactly." As the Harmony jumped to hyperspace, carrying them toward their next adventure, neither of them noticed the small group of maintenance droids in the cargo bay, quietly planning their own revolution. After all, artificial intelligence had learned something important from watching their human and alien colleagues. Sometimes the most important changes started with the smallest acts of rebellion.